Galyamov is a Russian independent political analyst and a former speechwriter for Russian President Vladimir Putin. According to the former Kremlin worker who has left Russia and now lives in the West, Vladimir Putin and his cronies already have a plan in place to flee the country once things go sideways. This is what the former aide to the Russian president claimed. The former speechwriter for Putin made this astounding claim on Telegram, citing an unnamed source that he said had insider information on the whole affair. The evacuation plan, according to Galyamov, got underway back in the spring when it was unofficially dubbed the Noah's Ark. As the name implies, it's about a search for a new land to go to in case it becomes completely uncomfortable in the homeland. The leader's entourage has not ruled out that he will lose the war, be stripped of power, and have to urgently evacuate somewhere, Galyamov wrote. I'm talking to Abbas Galyamov today. Mr. Galyamov, welcome to the program.
Hello.
Yeah, that's quite a claim that you make there, a claim that has gone around newspapers around the world. That's the latest claim that I've heard. Just give me an idea of where do you get this from?
So before I mention speak about my sources, I would like to clarify that what I was telling is not that they are, ready, packing their suitcases and ready to depart at any moment. No, this evacuation plan is just in case everything goes wrong.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that they are ready to admit defeat and they are going to stop fighting and going to flee right now. No, it's, I would say, a third tier plan, so to speak. The first tier is just continuing the war, trying to overcome Ukraine, if not on the battlefield, which now looks hardly possible, then with the help of oil and gas diplomacy. They are really hoping that this winter Europe will freeze without Russian natural gas supplies, which Russia cut off. And they're hoping that Europe will drop to its knees and crawl to Russia, and then Russia will dictate the conditions. So Europe will stop supplying arms to Ukraine. Ukraine will have to go to the negotiations table with Putin, and there Russia will get at least part of those things it was planning to get from the very beginning, like neutral status of Ukraine, free from NATO, or, for example, some of the territories. So at least get something back. So this is the first tier plan, so to say. The second tier is that the Russian elites, the Putin's entourage, they're hoping that if they don't manage plan number one, then they will convince Putin to step down and find a successor, choose a successor who would be a little bit more liberal, who will stop the war, start negotiations with Ukraine, with the West, and alleviate sanctions, thus trying to save the system. So Putin will become the a member of the upper chamber of the Russian parliament, Federation Council, which is the former presidents should get a life membership. And so he will be immune there. He will have personal security guarantees. And his successor, the successor whom he chooses, will try to elevate the pressure onto the system, trying to save it. So this is the second tier plan, so to say. And only if this plan fails, if, for example, Putin refuses to step down, if he tries to get re-elected in 2024 and he loses those elections, or the revolution starts because of his attempts to falsify the elections, because as a political consultant who is working with the Russian public opinion for many years, I would say it's really hard to believe that he would be able to really win this election, because having the background, like you should understand that his popularity, his ratings were going down at least since 2018. And if he doesn't manage to win the war, and the war is going on and it's getting less and less popular, which is already happening, so he would really be not able to win the majority. So he will try to falsify the election, and at this moment, as we know, the Orange Revolutions might happen. And we are not sure about the position of his security forces, his security apparatus, and his military, because now they are displeased with him because of this war. So if he fails, if he attempts to get reelected and he fails, and the whole system collapses, like it was in 1917, having the background of the non-popular First World War, or what it happened in 1991 with the background of non-popular Afghan war in Afghanistan. Well, in this case, if it happens, then only in that case, this Noah's Ark plan will come into play. But everything should be ready by this moment. So that's why they started working on this. Now about my sources. I had two sources independent of each other. One of them just told me, like, I don't know the details. I just know that they're preparing some kind of evacuation. And the other source was working in Russian official government, Russian government's oil company Rosneft, headed by Sechin, one of the Putin's cronies from many years ago. By the way, he is close to South Africa. He was beginning his career as a military interpreter and probably intelligence officer in Angola back in 1970s. So this Igor Sechin, who is now the head of this Rosneft, he has very good close relations with Maduro, the president of Venezuela. And so this source told me that Sechin sent his deputy and chief of the administration of the company, Kurilin. He has American citizenship. So in June, he sent he sent him first to America, then to Venezuela, to start those negotiations, to start arranging everything. This source told me that before Venezuela, there was idea of fleeing to China. And originally, China was considered to be the main destination, but and it was offered by Yuri Kovalchuk. It's another Putin's crony, a banker, and a banker responsible for the war. As Times was writing, it was exactly Kovalchuk who was convincing Putin that this war was necessary. So this Kovalchuk, he offered to China as a rescue, but soon they had some negotiations, and then they got disappointed in this plan. As I understand, as my source told me, like the Chinese were not so happy they were not displaying happiness about this, like, because they respect you, as my source told me, they respect you when you are the winner, when you're strong, and if you are a loser, they don't need you.
Yeah.
So they decided that Venezuela would be more reliable. He also mentioned Argentina, but without any details. He told, I don't know any details about Argentina. I don't know who is holding those negotiations. He is like, he told that maybe they are frozen now. Maybe they're conducting those negotiations with Argentina.
Yeah.
Maybe they're just discussing the possibility of Argentina, but haven't started anything yet. Maybe they already stopped that. He doesn't know the details. Because Kovalchuk was responsible for China. Sechin is responsible for Venezuela. Who is responsible for Argentina? He doesn't know. And my source is close to Sechin. That's why he knows some details about these things. So this is all I know. But since I mean, it's really important piece of information which shows that they are like they don't rule out that they will lose war, lose power. So sorry, it's not ruled out, and so they decided that. Oh, sorry. I decided that if they don't rule this out, I should tell the world about this, because this is really, really important information. Although I'm again telling that this is non-confirmed information. I never saw documents. Even my source didn't see any documents. He just knows the situation by through talking.
Yeah, but what you're really saying, Mr. Galyamov, is that this was part of the overall kind of calculus of the Kremlin, that these are the different scenarios. And if we get to the bottom scenario, namely we don't win this war and Putin find himself in a catastrophic situation and so on, there are already these plans that are being discussed about what then to do with Putin, and which country I would imagine would be positive in terms of him perhaps ever having to flee Russia. One of the reasons, of course, why I asked you for this interview is I was trying to get sources as close as possible to the Kremlin, as close as possible to the thinking of Vladimir Putin. Can you just, you were a speechwriter for Putin. Can you just give us an idea of what period was this that you were active working for the Kremlin? And I think even more important than that, second part of the question, when did things go wrong for you in the Kremlin and you decided to leave your position or to leave Russia? Can you give us a little bit of that background?
Look, all in all, I worked for 3 years. 1 year when Putin was the president, 2 years when he was the prime minister, and I quit in 2010. By 2010, everything was okay, and nothing predicted that something would go really wrong. Like we knew that Russia was, in general, it was being non-democratic at that moment. But under the presidency of Medvedev, it seemed to be modernizing and little by little moving in the right direction. So when I left Putin in 2010, I did it not for political reasons. It was just personal career. I got a very nice proposal. You know, and for 3 years you are writing speeches, even if you are doing it for the politician number one in the country, it's still getting a little boring. So I got a proposition to move as a deputy governor to one of the biggest Russian regions and work, so to say, on the soil. So I found it very interesting, and I moved there. And by 2018, after Crimea, it was already clear that country was really heading in the wrong direction. And in 2018, I moved my family to Israel. And before the beginning of Corona, I was still working in Russia. My family was in Israel, but I still felt secure enough by myself, and I was doing political consultancy for Russian politicians, and so making elections, you know, and then after the war started, and I became a vocal critic of Kremlin. Well, yes, now I already don't venture to travel there. Now I'm staying with my family in Israel.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about that because you've been quite critical of Putin and you've been quite outspoken and what I've seen recently of you. Is that a difficult position for you to take? And am I right if I say that you are in opposition to Putin, that you do not approve of the political directions of the country or the decisions that have been made in terms of this war, that you're not a Putin fan? Am I right about that? And B, does that threaten your own position where you are at the moment in any way?
Well, you're absolutely right. Now I'm clearly in opposition to him, although as a political analyst, I should be objective, and I'm trying to be objective. And if I see that they're doing something strong, I'm telling this. But luckily, they're not doing much strong things now. They're on the losing end, which is ultimately good. So I'm in opposition now, and here in Israel I feel quite safe and no problem. Yes, I had to lose all my contracts in Russia. Now for Russian politicians, I'm too risky contractor, so to say. So I'm now completely independent of Russian politics. I no longer have clients from Russia, even among opposition. So it gives me a free hand, and you asked me if it was difficult. Now, after you made a decision, it's not difficult, because speaking truth is an easy thing. It's a comfortable thing, and I kind of I'm enjoying my freedom at least. So it's like this.
Well, one does have the impression when, there's a lot being written about Putin. I beg your pardon. A lot of negative stuff written about Putin, and one has this sort of idea of Putin has got his hands everywhere, he's got his eyes everywhere in the world. So that is why I'm asking you that question: is, are you a safe man where you are sitting right now? I'm not even going to disclose where you're sitting, because I don't know if that's something the one ought to disclose. But you are not in a position that you are in any way, or has been, as a result of your criticism towards the Kremlin and towards Putin. You're not in any way felt any sense of a threat to your own life or towards the position that you've taken in.
No.
Am I being too dramatic, Mr. Galyamov?
Well, nobody knows for sure, of course. And they're in Kremlin now. They went totally crazy. But I think they have a lot of problems to solve, which are way more important than myself. So maybe they hate me. Like, I know they hate me. But
I'd like to go back to the background of this conflict in the Ukraine, and talk about something that's not being much discussed in the Western media, the background to this war. Am I right if I say that there's at least something to be said for Putin's position, who have for the last 20 years tried to get Washington around the table to talk about a new security construction for Europe? Am I right or wrong if I say that there seems to be at least some reason for Putin, as the leader of his country, to say that the incremental movement of NATO towards Russia's borders is a threat to Russia?
Look, my point is that we should distinguish between the real reasons of the conflict and the pretext. So what you're speaking about, those are nice pretexts. But the real reason, it doesn't have much to do with NATO, even less to do with Ukraine. It lies in the sphere of Russian domestic politics. For 20 years, Putin was, for 22 years already, actually, almost a quarter of a century, Putin was consolidating power inside the country with the help of rattling weapons and looking for outside enemy. So he was imposing this psychology of a castle besieged by the enemy. Like when there is enemy at the gate, no one inside the castle has the right to criticize the commander of the castle. Not now. Not when the enemy is going to assault to climb our walls. So this is the only way, actually, Putin can govern Russia. And since 2018, he was facing growing crisis of legitimacy. Well, actually, first he got this crisis after he left Kremlin and Medvedev became the president. his ratings, little by little, since 2009, his ratings went down. At that time, it was first the financial crisis and the decrease in the living standards, and like the formal reason of this decrease in ratings. But actually, then it was added, like, people kind of like they felt they can go without Putin. Actually, for 10 years they were getting used to him, and then they understood, okay, it's possible to live without him. He is the prime minister, and like, so demand for him to come back was getting lower and lower. And when he declared that he would come back in 2011, he declared that next year he would return to this position. If you remember, there was a huge revolt happening in Moscow. More than 100,000 people were protesting for almost half a year. People were coming out into the streets, and it was a really serious crisis of legitimacy. It lasted till 2013, and at the beginning of 2014, Putin made this operation and he got Crimea. And this crisis was immediately solved. I mean, his ratings they skyrocketed. He was really something like more than 80% approval rating. And so it was like, he saw that, like, I can solve the crisis of legitimacy by performing some applying some strongman tactics in foreign policy. So foreign policy is a very good way of solving domestic problems.
Yeah.
And sorry, I'm coming sorry for making it too long. For you to understand the context, it's important. Yeah. The context is important. So, and till 2018, between 2014 when he annexed Crimea and 2018, he was like God, really, like no opposition at all, and he was out of critics. The Russians were praying at Putin. But since 2018, actually, when he got reelected last time, after the re-election, which happened in March, since May, his ratings went down. And after this, his legitimacy was getting weaker and weaker. And the main problem was that Russians were turning away from foreign policy. They got sick and tired of Ukraine and NATO and America and Syria and African issues, which were imposed onto them. And they were beginning to turn back to domestic issues. And there in Russia, we have no reasons to speak that Putin is so indispensable that he should be ruling Russia forever. What we have there, declining economics. We have lowering living standards. They're falling down for almost 10 years now. And we have declining social infrastructure, healthcare system. And so all this, the feeling that the country is going in the wrong direction was getting stronger and stronger. And, last year we had elections to the federal, to the parliament, national parliament. And during these 3 months of the campaign, Putin had minus 7 percentage points of his approval rating. That is the clear indicator of what would happen when the next election comes, 2024, his presidential election. Election is the period when all the people, even non-political ones, they start thinking what they want in the future. So they like make the big appraisal of the situation, and it's minus 7 percentage points. And so by the end of the previous year, crisis of legitimacy was absolutely obvious. At this moment, Putin started, this saber rattling, and it's trying to attract attention of Russians to foreign policy. It's like with the drug addict. When a drug addict is getting used to the drug, he requires more and more of this drug to get the same amount of pleasure, which was previously he was getting from smaller ones. So to get them think about America and Ukraine, you've got to always increase tension. You've got to escalate all the time. So Putin was beginning this escalation. I think he was not planning, originally he was not planning war. He was just hoping that he was would press his point, he would move the troops around,
Mm-hmm.
and he would impose this foreign policy agenda onto Russians again. And then Zelensky, he's, in Putin's eyes, who is Zelensky? He is just an actor, third-rate actor. He is a kind of he's a weakling, and so Putin was sure that he would get broken, and he would meet at least part of his demands. If not, remember in December Putin issued ultimatum, and he gave like 2 months to think till February, and he was hoping that Zelensky would meet at least part of those demands, and he would appear the winner again, almost like he was after he annexed Crimea.
Yeah.
And this will be a boost to his popularity. And all of a sudden, it turned out Zelensky told him to screw. Zelensky told him, like, nothing. You get nothing. And Putin, like, you can imagine, the thing with which Putin is preoccupied the most in this life, at least in his political life, is just trying to appear strong. He really hates looking weak. He always wants to look the strong man. So, and he found himself in a situation when he pulled out the knife and he's threatening the guy, and the guy is laughing at him and showing him his middle finger. And what does he have to do? Just to put back his knife into pocket and walk away? Like, he would become the laughing stock. Like, his own elites will stop respecting him. After this crisis of legitimacy which was already beginning, would just speed up, and he had to strike. Of course, when he struck, he thought that it would be something like Crimea. It would be something like 2004, quick and decisive. Just several days, Zelensky will flee. Ukrainian army will surrender, just like it was in Crimea. He just made a huge miscalculation. He didn't understand that Ukraine of 2014, which was post-revolutionary, and the authorities there was totally like there was no legitimate government. The state was paralyzed. It was at that particular moment in 2014. It was like deconcentrated. It's like failed state. And at that time they were like this, but now it's totally different. It's a legitimate state with a legitimate president, with the army which has like ideology, and he made he failed to see this change in Ukraine. His FSB, his foreign intelligence, Kremlin analysts, they all failed to see this change in the nature of Ukraine, Ukrainian nation, Ukrainian state. So they made these several miscalculations, and they made this attack. So, in my opinion, the real reasons why he made this, they lie in the sphere of Russian domestic politics. This is just the way he rules Russia. This is how he keeps his authority over Russians. He keeps control over this country. If there had been no Ukraine, no NATO, he would still have found somebody to attack, somebody, I mean, at least to produce ultimatum to, somebody against whom to unite Russians, like make this rally around the flag effect. That's what he was looking for.
Mr. Galyamov, you've just painted a picture now that I have to question, because it seems to me almost outrageous to claim that this is all just about Putin. Is it not a fact that the NATO expansion is the major reason for this war? Is it not something that has causes much debate? I mean, we've heard other voices as well. I mean, we've heard Henry Kissinger talking about this. We've heard the American ambassador to Russia already saying some time ago that Ukraine is a red line. What you really told me now is that, no, this is about Putin and Putin's maintenance of his power in Russia. It seems just questionable to me. So I want to go back to just this again. I spoke to Professor Jeffrey Sachs, and I've spoken to people like Colonel Douglas McGregor and the Scott Ritters of this world and so on to get to hear the other side of this viewpoint. And it seems to me that there's general consensus, at least about the fact that there's a legitimacy in Putin's claim that Russia has become encircled by NATO, that the Minsk agreement was never really came into being. In fact, his latest claim, after what we heard from Angela Merkel recently, is that he should have gone in before. And I've not personally seen anywhere any statements from Putin the way he talks about Russian expansionism or anything like that. I just find it somewhat difficult to swallow that this is all about Putin and his power.
Well, it's good that all these people whom you mentioned, they are looking for Americans, for example. They are looking for reasons of what happened, of the disaster which happened in themselves. This is how responsible people should behave. They should be, before blaming others, they should blame themselves. So this is really good behavior they're displaying. Even before those people, I remember it was George Kennan, probably the most famous Sovietologist of America, maybe the founder of this science, the author of this doctrine, which was implemented by American administration since Truman.
Mm-hmm.
So George Kennan, back in the 90s, he was already an old man at the time, and he told that the decision to expand NATO was a grave mistake, which will lead to conflict with Russia. So, of course, there is certain truth in this thing. Everyone should be looking for the reason in himself. America should be looking for the reason in American behavior, trying to change its behavior to avoid wars. Russia should be looking for reasons in Russia. Like, this is the wrong thing for Russians to try to point fingers at Americans. Just like for Americans, it's wrong to point at Russians. This is the only way of you can make sure that the wars will stop. That's why I concentrate on Russians' behavior. And number two, Ukraine was not the first country to enter NATO which borders Russia. As we know, Baltic republics, Poland, they all border Russia and they are NATO. So it's not that, something drastic happened. Previously, we had no NATO near our borders. Now we got it. Mm-hmm. No, it's wrong. So the real reason why it's problem with Ukraine, why? It lies in it's also in psychology, in collective psychology. Russians and Ukrainians, they are really very close nations with common history, very close culture and languages, which are very much like, American English and British English, and a little bit slightly more apart, but still, they're all Orthodox Christians. They are both Slavic nations. So they're really close culturally and historically. So this is exactly what makes the problem bad. Russians, they have this for many decades, even hundreds of years. They were Russia politically. Russians were always preoccupied with some kind of missionism. First, for several hundred years, since at least the 15th century, they were imposing onto the neighboring nations this, like, we are the only true Christians, the Orthodox Church. Moscow is the third Rome, the name of the doctrine. And then communists came to power. And for 70 years, Russians were trying to make the world revolutions. The world revolution. They were trying to make the whole world communist. Yeah. Again, very, very messianic. And now Putin is always trying to become the leader of the non-Western world, fighting this neo-colonialism which West is imposing onto the world, fighting against these non-traditional modern values and defending traditional family values. So again, trying to save the world. And Ukraine, since like first they showed it in 1991, then they showed it in 2014 very strong by making this Maidan revolution against pro-Russian president, and then again in first 2004 and then 2014 they overthrew Putin's crony Yanukovych, and after this they started real rapid movement towards becoming a normal democracy, like free elections, trying to fight corruption, although not very efficiently, but trying to. So they were very more and more pro-democratic. And Russian public opinion, this patriotic, so to say, this conservative Russian majority public opinion, it deep inside, especially in the last years when we were facing the crisis of legitimacy of Putin, not only Putin personally, but his ideology too. They were on the decline. Deep inside, they felt that we, for many, many years, for decades, for hundreds of years, we were doing something wrong. Like probably we should be just another Western nation, just build democracy, not trying to invent something to save the world. Like just and the success of Ukrainians was the scariest thing, because if they managed to do that, that would mean that really we were on the wrong track. We should have been just like them. Success of like Latvia or Estonia or England or America or South Africa, it doesn't prove anything to us. We are different. But Ukrainians are just like us. Their success on this pro-Western, pro-democracy path, on the path to liberalism, would show that liberalism is okay with us. Like, this is the real feeling which gives energy to Russian anti-Ukrainian sentiment. It's also coming from our deepest fears that we are wrong. It's our own Russian complexes, so to say. Our own fear of having. It's our inferiority complex.
Yeah. Well, what is evidently clear to me, Mr. Galyanov, is that we don't understand the Russians here in the West, and the picture you're sketching to me gives me total different kind of views on the whole situation. But you cannot deny that there was at least American interference in the Maidan revolution, in what happened in 2014. You cannot deny that since 2014. Let me just complete this, and then I'll give you your right to denial. Let me just ask you this: there was certainly thousands and thousands of people killed in that part of the world since 2014. There was certainly a revolution going on of sorts in the eastern parts of the Ukraine. That we in the Western world largely ignored. That is one of the motivations also why Putin, and this is perhaps my viewpoint, decided that it's time to go into that part of the world.
Look, I understand that you're trying to get from me confirmation that to a certain way Putin was right. Look, what I can tell.
I'm not trying to get to that, Mr. Galyanov. What I'm trying to get to is that there seems to be a one-sided narrative at the moment, and I'm hard-pressed to believe that Putin is simply a madman. Let me put it in very kind of blunt terms.
No. He's not mad. No, I'm not telling you that.
I'm trying to find out what is the motive. What is the motive here for Putin? And my insistence is that there are two parts to the story.
Look, what was legitimate about his actions about Crimea is what I can confirm is that in something like 2014 2018 or 2019, I forgot, I saw some public opinion surveys from Crimea, and those were real ones, which I trust because, you know, we have a lot of fake ones. Unfortunately, we have a lot of fakes in Russian politics.
Yeah.
And but I saw those ones which were made by people whom I know and whom I trust, and those were both qualitative and quantitative researches, so really good ones. And the moods there were absolutely pro-Russian. And it was obvious to me that in 2014, the original movement of like trying to join Russia, it was absolutely genuine. It was grassroots. It was not astroturfing at the beginning. But so in a way, I don't know what is happening with the public opinion there now, but I had only one chance, I'm telling you, to get it. But it was the real genuine desire to join Russia after Maidan. But you know, still, like, there is publicly recognized international law that you cannot just make a referendum on a territory of neighboring country and take this territory, especially when you're making this referendum under control of your own military, which are coming in before you make this referendum. Like, still there was violation of law on behalf of Putin. Speaking about the eastern part, this Donbass, I think their public opinion there is something in between absolutely pro-Russian like it was in Crimea and absolutely anti-Russian like it was in the western part of Ukraine. It was something in between. Definitely, people in the east of Ukraine, which is like the territories which are controlled by Russia now, they were more pro-Russian. So there was some kind of support for this, you know, pro-Putin and anti-Maidan, anti-Ukrainian social forces. There were groups of public who wanted these territories to join Russia, just like in Ukraine. But nobody was really trying to count those votes. Just Russian troops entered the territory, annexed it, and they started suppressing the public opinion there. So it was not like there was a chance to play for Russians to play democratic game there. But they failed to do this. They didn't deliver. They brought in their military forces and suppressed any opposition to their.
Yeah, you see, the problem, Mr. Gailamov, is not is obviously that, you know, there's always two ways in which this story can be told. The Russians would say that they brought in their military to protect the people. There were also threats coming from Kiev towards the people during the time of the referendum, and the problem is for us to try to sort out where does the truth lie here. Let me ask you this, and maybe more conclusively, is do you believe that the people of the Donbass, the people of the eastern regions, after this referendum that we've seen, that they find themselves now in their natural home, Russia, or do you believe that that is still questionable?
Look, after so many years of war, so many years of expulsion of people and suppressing people, unfortunately, there is no way of finding the true public opinion. The majority of people living there, they left the territory. Those who stay there, they're afraid.
Yeah.
For several years, they were afraid of pro-Russian separatists, which were absolutely brutal and oppressive. Now they are afraid of Russians losing and Ukrainian special forces entering the territory. And obviously, it's a war. They most probably they wouldn't be kind towards these traitors, so to say.
Yeah.
So, and they're afraid of them too. So the situation is became so bad there that I don't see any kind of solution, with the exception of trying to put it aside. I mean, deciding this question right now is impossible. Just let's put it aside for 10 years, for example, and in 10 years there should be like a real, not fake, like it happened in 2014 in Crimea, but a real referendum should happen there under the control of international monitors.
Yeah.
But who is going to run that territory now? It's not clear, because there is humanitarian crisis.
Yeah.
People are literally starving there. So, I'm not an expert in international politics. I'm not an expert in solving humanitarian crisis, so I don't have an answer to this question. I'm an expert in domestic politics, in how to hold elections. I can help them arrange a referendum, but I don't know what to do before that. So, with regard to the eastern part of Ukraine, this is definitely a very complicated question. But with regard to the other parts of Ukraine, with bombing cities, invasion, definitely this is 100% Putin's blame, and there is no reason to go into victim blaming and trying to find arguments trying to prove that Putin is not to blame. I disagree with that.
I'm just trying to find a kind of a balanced view on this all, and I believe it's very important that if we want to reach peace, that we understand both sides, that is very, very important, and that we respect both sides of this war as well. I know you have little time. Let me just make a huge jump now and go to the here and now. It's winter. We know about the situation in terms of electricity shortages, how Putin's people have bombed electrical plants and this sort of thing. We are experiencing, at least that's my interpretation, some cracks in the support for Ukraine from the Western world, a certain amount of war fatigue that is beginning to happen. Putin has got, 300,000 men on the ready and on the move. The narrative is that the Russians are losing this war. Do you believe that narrative?
Right, absolutely. Sure, no doubt at all. It's just the question of how much time it will take for Russians to lose the war. The regime is absolutely inefficient. It cannot mobilize. It's funny. We have all the resources necessary to win the country: human, economic, military, everything. Russia can win, but this regime is already so inefficient that it cannot generate those resources. So obviously, Ukraine plus America and Europe, which is helping Ukraine, they can generate much more resources. So ultimately, they would win. It's just the matter of when Russia breaks down. Maybe it will happen in several months. I don't rule this out in March, for example. Probably not before, but maybe in March, April. Maybe it will drag for one more year. But the longer it lasts, you should understand that this war is getting less and less popular in Russia. And if it continues without the end, it will really lead at some point to a revolution. Just like the First World War led to a revolution in 1917, and the Afghan War led to breakup of the Soviet Union. And so there is no way Russia is going to win this war.
Well, let me say to you once again, I think the biggest problem that we are facing with right now is how do you distinguish between what is the truth, what is fake, what is real, what is propaganda, etc., etc. Your reference, for example, now to resistance to the war in Russia. On the other side, one hears again 78% approval rating of Vladimir Putin. So my problem in all of this, Mr. Galyamov, is that I As an outsider, at least you're a Russian. I think you have a more profound understanding of it all. But it is very, very, very difficult to actually to find the truth in this whole situation. I'm going to ask you this as a last question. I would predict to you, as an outsider who is not a militarist, who doesn't know anything about these, who does not know Russia at all, but that Putin, it seems to me, will be in a position to dictate the terms of peace at the end of the day, and that he will maintain that which he had intended to take from the beginning, and that other than what I hear from you, that Putin is in a stronger position than I think you're suggesting. I'm expressing a very personal viewpoint here. But yeah, give me your reaction on that. Do you think that challenge my view, that at the end of the day, I think the Russians are in fact still in a strong position. And I heard General Milley the other day saying that it will be very, very, very hard for Ukraine to claim back all its territory, that's almost an impossibility at this point. I suggest to you that Putin will be the man who will dictate the terms around the peace table in a few months' time. Your reaction?
Well, the only thing which can help him to do this is nuclear weapons. Yes, having nuclear weapons, he has a say, but no other reasons. No conventional weapons, no political strength, no economic strength, nothing.
I think that we need to revisit this discussion, Mr. Galiamov. I want to thank you very much for this.
Thank you.
It's fascinating to hear your viewpoints, and I would like to, in advance, invite you back in a month or 2 months' time to reevaluate our positions. Thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.